Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Sheriff's Mic, Cleared to Talk. I'm Corey Honey, Sheriff of Butte County, and on this podcast series, we talk about public safety and criminal justice related issues. And today, we're going to talk about an issue that is plaguing law enforcement nationwide, and in particular here in California, and that's the issue of trying to recruit people into this profession. I got to tell you, it is a real challenge. Across California, I talked to chiefs of police, sheriffs, and they're all telling me the same kind of story. It is harder and harder to find people who want to come to work in this law enforcement profession. You know, interestingly enough, according to a recent study released by the California's Public Policy Institute, the number of sworn officers per capita has dropped significantly over the last decade. It's down 9% since 2008. Interestingly enough, the vacancy rates for sworn positions increased significantly from 2011 to 2022. And this is particularly problematic because a 2018 study demonstrated that when you have more cops on the street, you have an increase in public safety and a reduction in crime. And so our inability to get people to come to work in law enforcement has a direct and negative impact on public safety. Agencies across the state, especially rural counties like Butte County, are particularly struggling to fill open positions with qualified personnel. And so that creates this ripple effect, increased overtime for the people that are currently working, burnout, slower response times, and ultimately, as I said before, it impacts safety within our communities. So the question is, what do we do about it? And to help answer that, I'm joined today by someone who knows this issue inside and out, Alex Johnston, co-founder of Epic Recruiting. Alex and his team are at the forefront of developing professional, strategic recruiting campaigns specifically tailored for law enforcement. Alex, welcome to the Sheriff's Mic. It is great to have you on this program.
Thank you so much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
So I'd like to start a little bit about your background. I think this is a really interesting niche and an interesting collaboration. But I think you came to this, I mean, you weren't a cop, right?
No, definitely not a cop. Although some people think I'm like an undercover cop.
A narc.
Yeah, which is really weird because they don't know anything about me. I'll tell you a story about that later. But people think I'm like an undercover cop. But this is a really cool thing that we just kind of came across.
Yeah.
Brought our skill set and our talents to an industry in real need.
For sure. So tell us about your background. Tell us how you got to this point. What led up to it?
Well, I mean, my background is, I started in news. And for about 2 years, I was doing news promotion, marketing, commercials. I met my business partner there, who was on the other side of that. He was producing commercials for local businesses, local retail stores, and we just kind of met and came together. When we decided to go on our own, start our own business, we brought over a couple clients with us. One of those clients happened to be a local county sheriff. And we actually started, I mean, I'm going to date myself, but we were producing DVDs for the sheriff's department, and we would shoot just like a banquet video. And we would shoot like a department overview video, nothing related to recruiting necessarily, just something they wanted to have to kind of show internally. So we kind of built that relationship. And so, I mean, we were not just focused on law enforcement. That kind of happens further down the road. I mean, we were doing car commercials, casino commercials. We were doing, photography for, hospitals and stuff. But we started to kind of slowly build a niche and develop more services that had a lot to do with the law enforcement industry.
So before this podcast started, we were talking that you're very comfortable in this environment, but generally speaking, you're on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, this is not comfortable for me at all. I like, directing, and I like setting up the shot and then walking away and letting things happen and then deciding what went right and what went wrong. Me in front of a camera should probably never happen, but I'm going to make the exception for you especially. I was walking downtown Chico, and I saw this guy wearing a shirt that said, Honey, homie?
I can't believe
you,
that.
Is it?
You didn't really see that, I'm sure.
No, I'm just joking. But
there are some T-shirts out there that say,
but you
homie.
Probably love the spotlight about as much as I do. But I think it's funny that that maybe we're on the same page here, and that we like to be behind the scenes mainly.
Yeah, my job unfortunately thrusts me into the spotlight from time to time. Yeah. So I've had to get used to it. I've spent more time on your side of the camera, or rather the side that you're on right now, being the person who's being asked questions and being filmed. Right. And so this is new for me. I'm probably as equally uncomfortable on this side of the table asking the questions and kind of leading it as you are on that. Although it was last week I did an interview with you for our recruitment campaign, which we'll get into a little bit more. And you were gracious enough to accommodate this request, because I thought it'd be cool to let our community know what it is that your guys are doing for us and why it's significant, why it's important that we go this route. That said, though, I also understand that you're not a stranger to being on this, because you did some commercials, did you not?
I'm not going to tell you about it now because I don't want them to use that against me. But I did do some commercials back in the day, but that was like on an as needed basis. But yes, I was in some commercials that are pretty hysterical and regretful to watch now.
Well, I understand that there's a lot of film out there that I probably wish.
A lot of memes too, I hear.
There are memes. Yeah, you apparently done some research. Yes.
Yes. No, this is not. I'm not going to take full credit for this. I was running around with some of your sergeants and deputies yesterday, and they're like, "Make sure you give him some jabs
about the memes.
He can take it.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. The memes are an interesting thing. They kind of developed during the campfire, and it was one of those things where I wasn't initially aware of it because we're so busy dealing with the the crisis itself, and then as the days wore on, I became more and more aware of it. I think I first really became aware of how many of these memes and the people in the community, they're aware of them. When I walked into our dispatch center and they had printed out a whole bunch of them and posted them up on the wall, and I started seeing what these. But it's interesting because it was one of those things where I wasn't sure if I was comfortable with it to begin with, and they were all overwhelmingly positive and supportive, and then I would speak to people in the community who would come up and go, "Man, I saw this meme or that meme, and it was hilarious. It brightened our day." And I realized it was this phenomenon that gave people an opportunity to have a little levity in an otherwise really challenging and horrific set of circumstances. And so it was beyond me. It wasn't really about me. It was just about the time that we were in, and it kind of gave people a little bit of a respite for that. So they're out there. I don't mind it, and overall I think it was a good thing for the community.
It's funny because when I was in news, one of kind of the formulative moments for my career, because I was really young, I was very, very low on the totem pole, but we had a wildfire that took up 100% of our coverage in the news, and I had to go out and produce promotions for the stories that kind of came about from those wildfires, people losing their homes, people not knowing where their family is or what they're going to do next. And that kind of developed my philosophy of storytelling and how that can go to marketing, really kind of capturing and connecting with people. So, that experience, although I would never want someone to go through it, I learned a lot from that experience in tragedy and how you capture kind of people. And this kind of coincides with law enforcement. People in their worst moments can really have kind of triumphant stories. So I really built my chops there. So
it's interesting you say that, because that's really been our experience as well here in Butte County. There have been a lot of crisis and tragedies that have taken place here in Butte County. And the sheriff's office has had to be on the forefront of responding to those. The thing that I've learned is, although I would never wish those kinds of tragedies upon the community, there are opportunities for us to propel ourselves forward, to become stronger, become more resilient. And you find ways to get through that and come out in some cases a little better. That doesn't at all try to lessen the impact that it's had on our community. But I think that's also been true of the sheriff's office in and of itself. And it's interesting because you're going around, I don't want to get into what your process is, but you've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of the members of our organization. And I suspect you're probably seeing some of that come through.
Absolutely. And kind of getting back to, like, I guess our origin story is, when we were doing this, we started in 2004.
Okay.
And we started to kind of dabble in law enforcement marketing recruiting in about 2011, 12. And what we realized right away was it wasn't so much about the job as it was the people.
Okay.
And what made it interesting and what made it marketable was kind of seeing people outside of the uniform, getting to know who they are, how they became, an officer or a deputy, and then capturing that, figuring out how we were meeting with all these people, and we spent all of our time having a bomb robot blow up a pipe, and chasing cars, like the kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
But we didn't really get good at what we did, and we didn't start producing results for our agencies until we kind of captured those emotional stories of the person who was behind the badge, the person outside of the uniform. And so that's why we get to know each and every department, whether they're in California or in Alaska or in Hawaii, is down to the individual, because that makes up the culture, that makes up the community, it makes up the lifestyle, and that's what we're doing for you all now. We're in that process of really getting to know who you are and the people that you serve.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really drew us to you when we were initially looking for somebody to help us with this process. And, not only just the specializing in recruiting for law enforcement, because it's a bit of a niche, right?
Yeah.
And you've recruited for law enforcement agencies throughout the entire country, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, in the last year alone, I want to say we did like 2 dozen agencies. Okay. And what's really interesting is, I mean, these are agencies. I think the smallest department we ever worked for was 6 sworn, and then we work with departments in the thousands.
Yeah.
And so what we try not to do is say, hey, this is a one-size-fits-all model. We're going to come in and tell you what to do, and that's going to produce a result. We come in, and it's going to be a collaborative effort. It is very unique to every single department or county or state as to what their needs are and how we're going to take on that challenge of recruiting and filling all those vacancies. So, yeah, we've been in Delaware, Wisconsin, Florida, Juneau, Alaska, Kauai, Iowa, a lot of California agencies. And back, I want to say 12, 13 years ago, I mean, we were doing exclusively California-only agencies. We really cut our teeth and learned a lot. The crisis we see across the country now happened in California 10, 15 years ago, if not further. So, the challenges that we see now is not unique to the state of California. It's kind of just transcended, in the last 5 years across the country.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an interesting thing, because you have this nationwide viewpoint, and from what I'm hearing from you, and certainly what I'm reading in the literature, is that this is a problem nationwide. It is harder and harder to find people to want to come to law enforcement. Also, is it fair to say that there are commonalities in terms of recruiting across the board, no matter what law enforcement agency you're recruiting, but then there's those differences that you try to draw out?
Yeah, I mean, everyone starts with the same challenge, right? People are no longer coming to us. We've got to go to them. Kind of start there. And then, okay, well, what's going to set now it's competition, right?
Yeah.
We're competing with, agencies who are our neighbor, across the state, across the country, because what we found is, there are that next generation of law enforcement who we really kind of need to educate, attract, and be like, hey, this is a good, secure career. This is what it's all about, and really kind of inform people about what makes this a good career. But then there's those individuals who have been on the job for 10 years. They love what they do. They don't love where they do it.
Yeah.
And so they might be looking, they might be working for a California agency, and maybe want to move to North Carolina or Florida for whatever reasons. And then you've got the people who are kind of disenfranchised, who have been doing this for 25 years. They would love to do it another 5 or 10, but they're like, you know what? This isn't what it used to be, and I'm gonna walk off into the sunset. So you've got kind of 3 groups that we're looking at when we're trying to create like marketing tools and content. But there are commonalities, but we try to kind of rule those out and then look for the differentiators. What makes your department unique? What are the opportunities that you have that others don't. Because if I'm someone who wants to get into law enforcement, I always try to have the mindset of, well, they're going to have choices. They're going to have 3 choices sitting in front of them. If they're looking at yours, what is going to make you stand out? What is going to make you the first option and the best option for that next step? And if we're informing them and the others aren't, then we're going to get a head start. So that's kind of the approach we need to take is, what sets us apart? How are we going to compete? What makes us different and attractive to a potential candidate? And it's got to be about fit, right? Butte County, it isn't for everybody.
Correct.
Just like Juneau, Alaska isn't for everybody. We want to inform you so that you're making a good decision, so that we know that we're making the right decision. I'm going to tell you exactly who we're looking for, and then you tell me if this fits with your career goals.
I think that's the absolute right approach, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. It's interesting you talk, because when I started my career some 33 years ago, the competition for these jobs was stiff. Agencies didn't market, they didn't recruit. They posted, perhaps they might post an ad in the want ads. That certainly dates me. But
like 1,000 people show up. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. and the competition, it was hard to get these jobs, and there wasn't much effort on the part of the agencies to have to go out and find people. And that's changed, as you know. You've seen that. It's been hard for, I think, law enforcement administrators like myself, who've been in the business for a long time, to figure out that the times have changed, the applicant pools have changed, the motivations for getting in the profession have changed, and the way in which we communicate with people has changed. And I particularly like this idea about finding the right person for our organization to fit into our culture. So tell us a little bit about the process. What does Epic do? How do you do this?
So, once we meet with an agency and we're taking on the project, the first thing we do is we meet with every team imaginable that is accessible to us. We want to learn about what you do well, what you feel like is maybe one of your weaknesses. It's almost like a job interview, and being like, okay, let's identify those things so that we can make the strengths rise to the top and really promote what opportunities that we have. And then we meet with individuals. So, an agency of your size, we meet with 30, 40 individuals who are, recently hired, who have been there for a while, who are nearing retirement. I want to get a good landscape of, what was your job trajectory? What was your career trajectory? And then for the younger deputies, how did you get here? How did you find us? What made you want to become, either corrections officer or a deputy? And I'll kind of identify one of the stories I heard in our discovery process with you is, one young guy who I did my ride along with he was a winemaker, and COVID, no more winemaking after COVID. So he's like, I want to start a young family, got a young wife, and I need a secure job. Very similar to what happened in 2008, with the economic downturn. People started looking for security, for, a place to, I'm not going to lose my job here. They're looking for government jobs. And they're like, I've always kind of had in the back of my mind, people always told me I'd be a good police officer or something like that. And so he became, he's applied, signed up, went through the academy, and now he loves it. And that is a far cry from winemaking to be on the streets as a deputy in the county. But you kind of find those like little stories, and that there's other people out there like that. So I'm going to pluck him, and I'm going to tell his story. I met with someone for Kauai PD who was an ex-Major League Baseball player. And not like there's a bunch of ex-Major League Baseball players out there but he returned to the island, his home, because he wanted to give back. He was looking for another career, the next step in his career. So now I'm looking for not only people who are looking as a second career, but maybe laterals to come over. So I'm trying to make a connection with somebody's story and the audience. So part of our process is that discovery, doing our research, finding out who you are and who a potential audience is going to be for that.
And we're kind of in that stage right now with the Butte County Sheriff's Office, and I talked a little bit ago about the interview that we did last week, and you did interviews with a bunch of my staff members. is it correct that that's where you really start to understand our culture?
Absolutely. I mean, when we were doing this in the early days, we were just kind of almost documenting. It was almost like a documentary of what it was like to be a cop.
Yeah.
Like as simple as that. But it was funny because the conversations that I was having off camera were far more interesting than what was capturing on camera. And so I would have these conversations. I'd be like, you did what? Like you were you were a philosophy teacher? Yeah. Or you have a psychology degree? Like, how did that happen? And we would have these awesome, I'm like, well, that's what we need to do. That's what the story we need to tell. We need to make an emotional connection with people. We need to have a commonality, a similarity to people who are out there looking for this career. And so what I kind of found out is we're not doing it justice because law enforcement is actually a creative career. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of creativity involved in having a law enforcement job. You have to be a coach. You have to be a counselor. You have to, there's improvisation involved. Yeah, you can be trained. Yeah, you can be prepared, but you really never know what you're getting into. So what we thought is what a great fit for us to bring our creativity, utilize their creativity. I mean, the cast is perfect. The sets are perfect. The scenes, they're all there. Let's do this in a really interesting way and not just capture what I can do at any department in any city, in any state.
So you're in the discovery process and you move into the production process,
correct.
Right? And I think that's the next phase for us. We're going to start moving in it. We've moved into it a little bit, started a little bit with that.
We were scouting yesterday.
Yeah. And in that, if I understand that part of the process, that's where you do get to film the cool stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I got some cool stuff planned for this one for sure.
Yeah, but by filming the cool stuff, you then also get to tell those stories about the behind the badge, the human side of it, the inside of it.
And it's not just, going back to the discovery process, we're also looking at the community, right? It's what is the lifestyle of a law enforcement officer in Butte County. So a lot of what we're going to be capturing is, and a lot of the questions that I ask is, what do you do in your off time? What does your family like to do? What are your hobbies? What are you really good at away from work? And people are like, I love to go hunting, or I've got a houseboat on Lake Orville, or I've got some jet skis, and we love to fish with my kids. And so 50% of what the story we're telling is not just what it's like to be a CO or a deputy at Butte County. It's about what my lifestyle is going to be like when I'm here working, and what am I going to do on the weekends? What is my family going to get to do? Because my mindset is, even if you heard of Butte County, I want to bring Butte County to you. Right? I want to highlight all the awesome things and opportunities that you can have here away from work. So a lot of the content we're going to be creating is going to be outside of the uniform, with families, with kids, and recreational. So it's not just the cool stuff; it's the lifestyle stuff too that we want to capture as well.
So I really love that as well. I've lived in this community for 3 decades now. I was drawn to this community. Most people who are from outside of California, when you say California, they think LA, maybe the Bay Area. They don't understand the Northern California vibe. They don't understand the culture. And what I love about Butte County is we are located in a part of the state where you can get almost anywhere quickly. You've got access to outdoor recreational opportunities. You've got enough infrastructure and kind of a quasi-city life that you can enjoy the amenities of that, or you can get to the Bay Area, or you can jump on, get down to Sacramento and get down to LA or other places. So there's so much to offer here, and I love the fact that you are going to highlight a portion of that, because that's part of what makes our agency great, is where we are located, who we serve, and the community that we get to live in.
Yeah, and even if, say you graduated from Chico State, you left, maybe you went to the Bay Area, maybe you went to another state, I want to remind you about home. I want to remind you about what you grew up loving to do, and maybe you have a reason to come back. Maybe you have a family member, or maybe you're at a different part in life where you want something that's back home. So we want to give people reasons to kind of come back to kind of explore the possibilities and just kind of tell the story of not only the agency but the county as well.
Yeah. So after production, and you talked about initially, you're putting together these CDs for.
Well, don't want to talk about that.
No.
Well, so back in the day when, and it kind of gets us to the next phase is, we did a recruiting video, and it was like 17 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it was, I got to be honest, it wasn't that great. Good luck watching a 17-minute. First of all, we were handing them at job fairs. They were handing them at job fairs, and good luck getting that person to take their DVD, go home, pop it in, and watch the whole entire thing.
Sure.
So we're like, this needs to live on a more modern platform, and shorter, bite-sized pieces and more consumable content. And so we're like, as we started kind of growing in, the internet started getting bigger and YouTube and all those things, that's the platforms we started utilizing that content for. And next kind of brings us to, well, where do people go? Mm-hmm. And in our research, we're like, okay, well, even if I got someone to be like, yeah, that looks awesome, I want to be a sheriff's deputy, they were going to like a county site or a city site and a state site and getting just, where do I go? Click on this drop down menu, click on the department, go over and click on this link. And by then, good luck with, keeping their attention. So we started building websites with the content we produce. So we come in, we do photography, we do video, and then we build a website so that we have somewhere for people to go. A call to action and a streamlined process to get them to apply. So, they might come, a typical journey for a potential applicant is they'll see like a YouTube video, they'll click on that, link goes to the website, they'll discover like all the content there, and they'll be like, what's training like in Butte County? Like, what's that like? Because my previous agency isn't, that's not a strength, or they don't invest in that. They click on that, and we show them how much we invest in the importance we have in training. We see you doing jiu-jitsu and your commitment to that philosophy from the top down, and they're like, yeah, that's for me. Click on it, and now they're applying. Now they're filling out the information. So we really had to kind of like take our kind of skill sets and apply them to what the experience was like for a potential candidate or recruit or applicant. And so we did a lot of research on that, and that's kind of how we got to where we are now, which is what we're going to be producing for you.
Yeah, and the dedicated website for the recruiting and the navigating the application process was particularly key for us, because we've experienced trying to get people to our website and then to the HR website and then to the specific job posting and then to the application process. And it's clunky, it's hard to navigate, and we don't have a lot of data in terms of its effectiveness, but it wasn't really working for us. Anecdotally, we could tell. So I like the idea of this dedicated website with this really consumable information, because that's the way people consume information now, right? It's there. But then you got to get people to the website, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that?
Well, maybe let's use the analogy of a billboard.
Okay.
A traditional form of advertising, which we've done in the past. And I like to kind of talk about what we've done in the past in terms of like law enforcement, marketing, recruiting, because it has taken a while to get out of the comfort zone. And people, first you got to kind of like admit you have the problem, right? And then you got to kind of admit like what the problem is and the way you're going to fix it. And so I always like to kind of go back to the way we used to do things, because the way we can do them now makes a lot more sense. So if we go to the kind of the billboard analogy, and if you pass, what is it, I-70 or something, like the interstate here, and you pass it by and it says, hey, come join Butte County Sheriff. And you're like, that's great. And 2 million people pass that by a day. Well, how many of those people are even looking for a job? How many people live in Butte County? How many of those people want to, like, you're never going to be able to answer those questions. So we have to have a more modern, targeted, focused ability to get to where the candidates are. And so that's why we use platforms like streaming platforms, like say like Hulu, or digital ads that we place, throughout the internet, or social media ads. We used a modern approach to getting that content to the people that we identified in step one, who's our target audience, the people and where they're located. So like we'll be doing a campaign for a department in Virginia, and we might focus in New York because we have content to reach those people, and it might sit well with them. We represented an agency in Washington, and we were actually targeting North Carolina because there were a lot of similarities and opportunities in that market to get people to actually move across the country and do what they love, just in a different place. So in the step one in creating and developing the strategy, we identify the audience. And the last step, now we've got the content to reach out to them. Now we want to make that connection and get them to take that action.
So it's interesting you say that because I believe that I was a victim of one of your targeted marketing.
I apologize about that.
So I'll tell the story, and I don't know if I told you this, but I certainly told my staff. And you mentioned a moment ago about the fact that I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we're actually going to, me and my staff, we're going to film that, and that's going to be part of our thing. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So I do have social media accounts. I have an Instagram page and a Facebook.
You've got a pretty impressive IMDb page. You've got like more credits than Kevin Bacon.
Well, I don't know. Come on. I don't know.
I was looking last night. I'm like, why does he have so many IMDb credits? That's pretty impressive.
Well, it's because all the tragedy, all the.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I'm not just saying it's for a great reason. I'm just saying like you're out there for sure.
So I have these. I have like an Instagram page, but it's private. I don't follow law enforcement related things. It's all about kind of what my personal life is and what my hobbies is. And I got into training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu about 2-3 years ago. And so a lot of the content that I subscribe to or follow or consume on my Instagram page all deals with mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that kind of thing. So one day I'm going through my feed and this ad pops up for a law enforcement agency in Washington. And they have a program where they train their officers in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I actually recognized one of the people featured in that ad because I had encountered him in some other Jiu-Jitsu related circles. And I thought, man, this is really cool. I'm getting essentially a recruitment ad for this law enforcement agency, but they're targeting me because of my interest in jiu-jitsu. And so that's when I started doing some research. Who is doing this? And that's how I found out that you guys were doing the campaign for that. And that's what prompted us to start looking, hey, this is kind of a cool way to reach out to people and find people who we think would fit well into our culture and would thrive in our organization. And so it was so effective that it reached me before I even had an opportunity to reach out to you guys.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point. It's not that this agency was featuring jiu-jitsu. You connected with the person, not the activity. And so what we're hoping with you, and when I found out you were like really involved in this, I'm like, people are going to see your level of investment and your commitment to it. And it just doesn't talk about the training. It talks about like the leadership. It talks about, hey, he's mixing it up too. Like, this is a guy I want to work for. So like that's why those are those differentiators, the personality that we give to the content as opposed to just the content itself.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about that. And I think also the thing that's really key for me, and one of the things that I think you and I have talked a lot about is I'm not just looking for deputies or civilian staff members. I'm looking for people who will fit in our organization, who will thrive in our organization. And you mentioned a moment ago, you've worked with a lot of law enforcement agencies. They all have a different vibe, a different culture, and a person who might thrive working for Seattle PD or for San Francisco Sheriff's Office may not thrive at the Butte County Sheriff's Office, and vice versa. And so that's the piece that we're really trying to focus in on. And I think you guys are really trying to draw that out as well, right? In terms of
I mean, one of the questions I always like ask in my ride-alongs that we do is, who do you want to work next to? I think sometimes there's this reservation of like, of course you want to see applications, right? For sure. You want to see volume, but I think for the person that is working here now, they want to see people that there is a hard worker. They want to see that someone who's going to match their energy and have the same goals and mindset, because you have to depend on each other. You could be 17 minutes from help and you want to know who's coming. So everybody has to be, this is like all hands on deck. Everybody has to be a recruiter at this phase.
Yep.
And from now on, this content is going to live out there, and somebody's going to ask someone in the agency about it. I want them to be familiar with that content so that they have a response, and they could be out on the road and say like, hey, I saw an ad, you guys hiring? I want them to have that same level of information that we all do from the top, the people who put this together, because everyone becomes a recruiter. I want to attract people that you want to work with.
Yeah. The analogy that I use, and you picked up on it, was as an agency, based on all the things we've been through, we fight above our weight class.
Yeah.
And that's, goes back to the whole, notion of jiu-jitsu and MMA and things like that. You're fighting above your weight class. We are able to do things that, in my view, a lot of agencies our size with our resources aren't able to do. But for some reason, there's something about the collective coming together of our people that allow us to rise to the occasion. And so, we've talked about, I'm looking for people with grit, right? I'm looking for people with integrity. I'm looking for people who have the ability to think critically and rise to the occasion and have a heart for service. And I'm excited about the prospect of you helping us identify those individuals.
Yeah, and when we first met, you used that word grit, and I wrote it down. And actually, when I was meeting with the creative director and talking about kind of the style that we want to do this campaign in, I used that word. I said, I want it to be gritty. And he's like, oh, I love it. He loves that word. He loves the word gritty. But I said, I want it to be polished. I want it to be gritty, because that's what I really, it's not, don't take this the wrong way, it's not just what the sheriff wants.
Agreed.
It's what the sheriff knows. It's what he wants from his deputies, and they know he wants that from them. I said, this is a tone, a style I want to set across the board. So everything that we capture, I want it to feel gritty.
And interestingly enough, I think that's a reflection of our community as well.
Yeah.
There's a resiliency, there's a grittiness to it. And so I think a law enforcement agency should be a reflection of the community they serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point, is in the same fashion that I want to attract people that you want to work alongside, I want to attract people that the community wants to see out on the streets, that is going to be serving them. And so there has to be that connect. You want to have to come work for Butte County. So I want you to know what it's about, because I want to make that connection as well. As I want the community to love their deputies, to love the people that work in their communities. So
I agree with you. It is fantastic to work in a community that supports law enforcement, supports your agency. There's a collaboration that occurs between law enforcement and communities when that synergistic effect is in place. And I think that that's what we're striving for. I really do want to find people who are inspired to our vision, who would fit nicely into our culture. Because if they're not, then there's another place for them. And I wish them the best of luck. But there's no need in wasting our collective time, right?
Yeah, and there's there's officers out there who feel like their community doesn't support them.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and a lot of cities and counties are trying to take on that challenge of, hey, we've had a past, we're moving in the right direction, and we want you to be a part kind of our new approach. But there are some communities that they don't feel the support. They don't feel like they're getting the resources. They don't feel like they are in a position to do their job successfully. So they're going to be looking elsewhere, right? I want them to find us and see that a community that supports their law enforcement. So that's a story we need to tell as well, because if you don't feel that where you are now, hey, you might find a good home here.
Agreed. So before we wrap up, is there anything else that you think the listeners and people of Butte County would want to know about this process?
I mean, I would say just unique to this process in Butte County, first and foremost, your team is amazing.
Thank you.
I wish I could bottle them up and take them around the country with me just to get stuff done. So your team has been amazing, but I kind of think it speaks to the level of need and want that you've kind of set for everybody. And listen, no one at any point has been you are not actors. You didn't come to this job to be in a recruiting video, So this is a big ask for us. We need you all to be hey, just so you know, this is the goal that we have, and we really need to be on board and believe in this process. So everyone from top to bottom, every single person I've met with has just been really excited to be a part of this. And I think that kind of speaks to the level of commitment you guys all have to your community and service.
I appreciate that. And, when you and I first met, we were talking about whether or not to, bring you guys on. I asked you what makes for a successful
yeah, I remember that
campaign.
question.
Yeah. And your response was commitment and collaboration. If we just expect you to come in and do it all, it's probably not going to be very successful. It has to be a collaborative process. And so that's certainly what we're trying to do. And I'm glad to hear that that's what your experience has been up to this point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Well, that's it for today's episode of the Sheriff's Mic, Cleared to Talk. If you're thinking of a career in law enforcement, or you know someone who is, keep an eye out for what we've got coming. You can access information through the Butte County Sheriff's website. In addition to that, I can't tell you how much I think that Butte County is a special place to live and work, and we're trying to build a team of professionals who will serve our community in the best way possible. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Sheriff's Mic, Cleared to Talk. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, please like, follow, and share. That's how we'll get our message out. And as always, I'm interested in your feedback. I'd like to learn more about what you would like us to explore, what kind of topics. And if you'd like, you can let me know at sheriffsmike@buttecounty.net. So until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and as always, you're cleared to talk.